In the winter of 1876, the Bitterroot wind could erase a trail in less than a minute. But it could not erase the black braid lying across Elias Mercer's snowfield. At first, Elias thought it was bark, a strip torn from a pine, a dark thing half buried in the drift beside his woodpile. Then it moved. He set down the hatchet in his hand and stared through the white glare. Another shape lifted behind it, a sleeve, a pale hand. Then a sound came thin through the storm. Not an animal, not the cry of timber splitting in the cold. A woman's voice. Elias Mercer had spent 9 years teaching himself not to run toward human voices. The war had given him too many of them. Men calling for mothers, boys calling for water, his brother calling his name from a field hospital tent, fever burning through him faster than any bullet ever could. Elias had come west to get away from voices. He had built a cabin above a frozen creek, miles from the nearest road, with a roof low enough to hold heat and walls thick enough to keep memory outside. Most days it worked. That afternoon it failed. He grabbed his coat from the peg, wrapped a wool scarf around his mouth, took a coil of rope from beside the door, and stepped into the storm. The cold struck him like a plank across the chest. Snow climbed to his thighs. The wind carried needles of ice sideways across his face. Every step toward the drift felt like dragging his body through wet flour. But the braid moved again. And then Elias saw the second woman. 2 Chinese women, both in their early 20s, pressed together in the hollow behind a fallen spruce. Their cotton coats were useless in that weather. Their shoes were wrapped in rags. Their hair had frozen into black ropes against their shoulders. One of them was conscious. Barely. She was holding her sister upright with both arms, even though her own hands had gone blue at the fingertips. When Elias reached them, she recoiled so hard she nearly dropped the other woman into the snow. "Easy," he shouted through the wind. "I am not here to hurt you," she answered in broken English. No town. That was all she could get out. No town. Not help. Not please. Not thank you. Just those 2 words, carried like a wound. Elias crouched beside the unconscious sister and felt for a pulse in her throat. There, faint, stuttering. But there, "You will die out here," he said. "My cabin is 20 yards behind those trees." The conscious one looked past him, toward the cabin smoke, then back into the white nothing beyond the creek. She was choosing between dangers, and she knew it. At last she gave one tiny nod. Elias tied the rope around his own waist, looped it once around the conscious woman so she could follow, then lifted the unconscious sister into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. That frightened him more than the storm. By the time he reached the cabin, his lungs were burning. The woman behind him stumbled twice, but she never let go of the rope. Inside, Elias kicked the door shut with his heel and laid the unconscious sister on the narrow cot. The other woman collapsed beside her. For a moment the cabin held only 3 sounds: the wind clawing at the chinking, the fire cracking in the stone hearth, and 2 young women trying not to weep. Elias turned his back before he spoke. "Wet clothes off. Blankets are on the shelf." "I will not look." Neither of them moved. He kept his face toward the wall. "I said I will not look." That time he heard fabric peeling away from skin, stiff with frost. He fed the fire until the flames grew high enough to push warmth back into the room. He set coffee on the hook. He pulled his spare socks from a wooden box and placed them near the hearth without turning around. Only when the rustling stopped did he face them. They were wrapped in one gray blanket, shoulder to shoulder, their faces nearly identical except for a small scar through one sister's eyebrow. Bruises marked both wrists, rope burns, not old. The one with the scar watched him like he was a loaded gun. The other sister opened her eyes slowly. Her lips were cracked. Her gaze moved around the cabin, counting exits. "My name is Elias Mercer," he said. The scarred sister swallowed. "Suyin," she whispered, touching her own chest. Then she touched her sister's shoulder. "Anmai." Anmai tried to sit up and failed. Elias handed them 10 cups of coffee. "It's bitter," he warned. Suyin took the cup with both hands and drank anyway. Anmai coughed at the taste, and for one short breath the sisters almost looked young. Then the wind hit the cabin wall, hard enough to shake snow from the roof. Both women flinched. Elias saw it. He saw more than cold in them. He saw the kind of fear that keeps looking over its shoulder even after the door is barred. Night fell early in the storm country. The cabin had one cot, one table, 2 chairs, a floor made from rough pine planks, and a bedroll that had belonged to Elias since the army. "You take the cot," he said. Suyin shook her head quickly. "No, we can sit. You take the cot." He said it without anger, but with the old army tone he hated hearing in his own mouth. The sisters climbed onto the narrow bed together. Elias laid his bedroll near the fire with his back to them. For a long while no one slept. The storm carried itself around the cabin like a living thing. Then Anmai spoke into the dark. "Mr. Mercer?" Elias opened his eyes. "What is it?" Her voice trembled. "You paid for food?" He did not answer at first. She tried again. "For fire, for bed." Suyin's voice came next, softer and worse. "We have nothing." Elias felt his body go rigid. The sisters did not understand his silence. Or maybe they understood too well. Anmai whispered, "We can pay." He turned just enough to see them in the red light of the coals. They were sitting up, the blanket clutched to their chests, shame and terror pulling their faces tight. And Elias understood, not because he wanted to, because the world had always been clear about what it believed poor women owed. Something hot and ugly rose in him. Anger, not at them, never at them. At the men who had taught them to ask the question that way. He turned fully away again, giving them only his back. "Sleep?" he said. His voice came out rough. "No one pays me for being alive." The cabin went silent. Then one of the sisters made a sound like a breath breaking in half. Elias lay beside the fire and listened to them cry into the blanket. He had thought his cabin was a place made for one man. That night, it became the first place in years where 3 broken people were not completely alone. The storm lasted 2 more days. By the second morning, the sisters were on their feet. Not strong, not healed, but moving. Suyin swept the ashes from the hearth with a bundle of pine twigs. Anmai mended a tear in one of Elias's shirts, with thread pulled from the hem of her own sleeve. They worked in silence at first, as if work was the only language that did not betray them. Elias had forgotten how much sound another human life made. The scrape of a chair, a cup set down carefully. Two women speaking low in Cantonese while steam rose from a pot of beans. It should have irritated him. Instead, the cabin felt less like a coffin. On the third day, their English came easier. Pieces of their story arrived out of order. Their father, Lin Wen, had crossed the ocean to work on the railroad. He had sent money to an older aunt in Guangdong for years, coin by coin, believing one day the family would own a laundry or a little store in a town that did not spit at them. But men like Lin Wen did not own the dreams they paid for. They owned debts, company shoes, company rice, company tools, company blankets, every object written into a ledger by men who always found a way to make the number grow. A misfire in a rock cut killed him before spring. 3 days later, Harlan Voss came to the tent where Suyin and Anmei slept. Voss kept books for a rail contractor north of the pass. He wore a fine watch and never lifted anything heavier than a pen. He told them their father's debt had passed to them. He told them their work was already promised. He told them the law would not care where two Chinese girls wanted to go. Then he locked the tent flap from the outside. Suyin had waited until the camp slept. Anmei cut through the back canvas with a kitchen knife. They took a bundle of clothes, their father's pocket shrine, and one silver coin he had hidden inside a tobacco tin. They followed the creek south. Then the storm found them. Elias listened without moving. His face stayed still, but his hand tightened around the coffee cup until his knuckles went white. He had known army clerks who could kill a man with ink. He had known officers who could make theft look like order. He had known whole rooms full of respectable men who believed a paper record could turn cruelty into duty. Harlan Voss was only another uniform. That evening, when the sisters had finished, Elias spoke more than he intended. He told them about Virginia, about mud deep enough to swallow boots, about a brother named Caleb who had marched east with a farmer's hands and died shivering under a blanket before he had ever fired his rifle in battle, about coming home to a mother who no longer recognized his face, about heading west because empty land seemed kinder than rooms full of people who wanted him to be whole. He did not look at the sisters while he talked. It was easier to speak into the fire. But when he stopped, Suyin placed a cup beside his hand. No sermon, no pity, just coffee. That was the first kindness he did not know how to refuse. Days stacked into a week. The snow settled. The creek sealed itself under glass. Sunlight returned in hard, silver sheets across the timber. Elias rode out once to check traps and came back before dusk with a rabbit and a sack of flour from a cache he kept under stone. When he opened the cabin door, he found Anmei standing on a chair, pushing dried herbs into a beam above the hearth. Suyin was kneading dough at the table with her sleeves rolled to the elbow. For one strange second, Elias saw the room without its loneliness. The sight unsettled him so badly he nearly stepped back outside. Suyin noticed. "You angry?" "No." "Then why stand like wolf at door?" Anmai covered a smile with her wrist. Elias looked at both of them, then at the flour on Suyin's hands. "I forgot what a house sounds like." The smile left Suyin's face, but not in a bad way. She nodded once. "We forgot too. That should have been enough. A little warmth, a little food, a little safety. But safety is never quiet when someone believes it has been stolen from him. The first sign came on the 8th morning. Horse tracks at the lower creek crossing. 3 animals. Fresh. Elias found them while bringing in wood. He knelt in the snow and touched the edge of one print. Still sharp, no melt. A rider had passed before dawn. Watching the cabin, he covered the tracks with loose snow before he went inside. Suyin saw his face and understood. Voss? Maybe. Anmai's hand went to the pocket shrine, hanging on a cord beneath her collar. The cabin changed after that. The sisters stopped standing near windows. Elias kept his revolver on the table while he cleaned the rifle. The fire burned lower at night, so the light would not carry as far through the pines. For 2 days, nothing happened, and that was worse, because fear has a way of making silence look like preparation. On the 3rd afternoon, the riders came openly. Harlan Voss rode first. Elias knew him before anyone said the name. A narrow man in a dark coat, clean gloves, a beaver hat too fine for the country, a smile that had never learned shame. 2 hired men followed behind him. One carried a shotgun across his saddle. The other had the thick shoulders of a man paid to end conversations. Voss stopped 10 yards from the cabin. "Mercer," he called, "I hear you have taken in strays." Elias stepped onto the porch. The revolver stayed low at his side. "They are not strays?" "No," Voss said, smiling wider. "They are debt." Suyin and Anmai were inside, but Elias could feel them behind the door. Voss pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I have the account. Lin Wen owed for passage, food, tools, medical supplies, burial charges, and damage to company canvas." He shook the paper once, as if the sound of it should settle the matter. "His daughters belong to the contract until the balance is paid." Elias looked at the paper, then at Voss. "Paper does not make people into property." Voss gave a soft laugh. "That is a very generous opinion for a man with no money and no badge." The hired man with the shotgun shifted in his saddle. Elias heard the leather creak. His hand tightened around the revolver grip. "Ride back down the pass," Elias said. Voss's face cooled. "Step aside." No, the word landed between them like an axe in a stump. Voss dismounted, slowly, carefully, as though he were the reasonable one. "You do not want a quarrel with the rail company." "I do not see a rail company." Elias lifted his revolver an inch. "I see 3 men too far from witnesses." For the first time, Voss stopped smiling. Then the cabin door opened behind Elias. Suyin stepped out with Anmai at her side. Both women were wrapped in Elias's spare coats. Both were shaking. Neither stepped back. Voss's eyes moved over them with the satisfaction of a man counting recovered goods. "There you are." Anmai flinched at his voice. Suyin did not. She held up her father's tobacco tin. Inside it was the silver coin, the pocket shrine, and a folded scrap from Voss's own ledger, torn loose the night they escaped. She had not told Elias about it. Her fingers trembled as she opened the paper. "You write wrong," she said. Voss's face changed. Barely. But Elias saw it. Suyin held the paper higher. "My father paid passage twice. You write again." Voss took one step forward. "You little thief." Elias moved between them. That was when the thick-shouldered hired man rushed him. Not with the shotgun, with a knife drawn low against his coat. Elias caught the man's wrist, but the snow made his footing bad. The blade flashed under his arm. Heat opened along his ribs. White, bright pain cut through him. He staggered into the porch post. Anmei screamed. The hired man came again, and Suyin moved first, not away, forward. She grabbed the iron stove hook from beside the door and swung it with both hands. The hook struck the man's forearm. The knife fell into the snow. Anmei snatched it up and kicked it under the porch before the man could reach for it. Everything froze. Voss stared at the sisters as if he had never imagined them capable of occupying space in front of him. Elias pressed one hand against the blood spreading through his shirt and raised the revolver with the other. His arm shook. His aim did not. "Leave," he said. The shotgun rider lifted his weapon halfway. Elias fired into the snow at the horse's front hooves. The animal reared. The rider cursed and fought the reins. Elias cocked the revolver again. "Next one is not a warning." Voss looked at the blood on Elias's shirt, at the stove hook in Suyin's hand, at Anmei standing over the hidden knife, her face white but steady. The calculation passed across him. The odds had changed. Not enough to make him afraid of the law. Enough to make him afraid of that porch. Voss backed toward his horse. "This is not finished." Elias breathed through his teeth. "It is finished on my land." Voss mounted. The three men rode out past the creek, leaving a churn of hoofprints and dirty snow behind them. Only when the sound vanished did Elias lower the gun. Then his knees gave way. The wound did not kill him, but for 3 weeks it tried. A ranch hand found the blood trail 2 days later and fetched a doctor from a settlement downriver. The doctor smelled of whiskey and cold leather. He sewed Elias by lamplight while Suyin boiled cloth, and Anmei held the lantern steady with both hands. "Missed the lung," the doctor muttered. "Lucky." Anmei looked at Elias, pale and sweating on the cot. "No," she said quietly, "not lucky." The doctor glanced at her, confused. Suyin finished the thought. "Stubborn." For the first time in days, Elias nearly smiled. After that, the cabin became a sick room. Time shrank to small things, water cooling in a tin cup, bandages drying by the fire, Suyin's hand checking the heat in Elias's forehead, Anmei counting his breaths when fever took him deep into the night. He hated needing help. He hated the weakness, the way his body betrayed him when he tried to sit, the way pain could turn a simple reach for a cup into a war of its own. But the sisters never treated his weakness as shame. They treated it as work, and work Elias understood. In fever the war found him. He heard rain on canvas, wagons groaning in mud, a boy crying for a surgeon who was already dead. He called for Caleb. He told his brother to hold on. He begged someone to bring water. Then hands held his shoulders down, not forcefully, but firmly. Anmei's voice came first. "You are in the cabin," Suyin followed. "The fire is here. You are not in Virginia. The snow is outside. Your hand is in mine. The war is not here." They said it again and again, not as a prayer, as directions back to the living. Sometimes Elias woke with tears on his face and no memory of making them. Sometimes Suyin was asleep in the chair beside him, her head bent forward, the stove hook still within reach of her hand. Sometimes Anmei sat on the floor with her back against the cot, humming something too old for him to understand. Little by little the ghosts retreated, not gone, never gone, but no longer standing at the foot of the bed every night. By the time Elias could walk to the door without leaning on both sisters, spring had begun arguing with winter. The creek broke open under its own ice. Water moved again. Pine shadows shortened across the yard. One morning, Elias stepped onto the porch and found Suyin repairing the broken hinge on the chicken crate, while Anne May planted onion starts in a strip of thawed earth beside the cabin. They had made his place useful in ways he had never bothered to imagine. A line for laundry, a covered shelf for kindling, a clay jar of ginger buried near the hearth, a small paper shrine placed high in the corner, where smoke from the fire curled beneath it before slipping through the roof vent. Elias stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. Suyin looked up. "You should be inside." "I have been inside for 3 weeks. You bleed outside, too." And Mai laughed, a real laugh. Quick, surprised, alive. It struck Elias harder than the knife had. He looked at the two women in the thin spring light. Not the half-frozen strangers from the drift. Not debts, not fugitives. Not burdens the world had tried to hand off to the nearest cruel man. Suyin with her scarred eyebrow and steady hands. Anne May with her quiet courage and eyes that missed nothing. They had not saved his life once. They had saved it in pieces. One fever night. One cup of water. One voice calling him back. One ordinary morning at a time. "I can take you to Missoula when the road clears," he said. The words tasted wrong. Necessary, maybe. Honorable, maybe. But wrong. Suyin stopped working the hinge. Anne May's smile faded. Elias forced himself to finish. "There is a mission house there. Work, maybe. Safer than this place." Suyin looked toward the creek. "Safer from Voss? Maybe. Safer from men who write paper?" Elias had no answer. Anne Mai stood and brushed dirt from her hands. "And you?" He frowned. "What about me? You go back to quiet?" The question found him cleanly. For years, Elias had believed quiet was peace. Now he knew quiet could be only another kind of grave. He looked at the cabin, at the woodpile, at the creek opening under the sun, at the small paper shrine in the corner behind him. "I do not have much," he said. His voice was low. "This roof leaks on the north side. The stove smokes when the wind turns. The land is hard. The nearest neighbors are far enough to forget your name." He swallowed. "But if you want a place no man can claim you by ledger or rope?" He looked at them both. "Then this place can be yours." Suyin's face folded, just once before she caught it. Anne May stepped closer. "And you?" Elias understood the question. "Not will you feed us, not will you hide us, not will you own us. Will you stay? Will you be here when fear comes back? When winter returns? When memory opens its mouth in the dark?" He stepped down from the porch carefully, one hand pressed against his healing side. "I will stay," he said. Anne May touched his hand first. Suyin covered both of theirs with her own. No church bell rang, no paper blessed it, no town agreed to understand. But that had never made a thing untrue. By summer, they built a second room onto the cabin. By autumn, they raised a proper roof over the porch. Suyin learned to shoot the old Spencer rifle and became better with it than Elias, though she pretended not to notice. Anne May grew beans behind the cabin and bartered mended shirts for hens, salt, and lamp oil. Elias took more work from the ranch downriver. not because solitude demanded supplies anymore, but because a household did. Harlan Voss did not return. Maybe he found easier prey. Maybe the torn ledger page in Suyen's tobacco tin made him cautious. Maybe he remembered the porch, the iron hook, and the revolver that did not shake even when the hand holding it bled. Whatever the reason, the pass stayed empty. Years later, travelers would sometimes stop at the cabin above the creek and find smoke in the chimney, beans drying under the eaves, and three people moving through the yard with the practiced rhythm of those who belonged to the same weather. They would see a white-haired man with a limp, stacking split pine. They would see two Chinese women, no longer young, laughing together as they carried water from the creek. They would see nothing extraordinary. That was the miracle of it. Not that the world had become gentle. It had not. Not that old wounds disappeared. They did not. The miracle was smaller, harder, and far more durable. Three people the world had tried to turn into ghosts had learned how to keep each other in the room. The storm had brought them to his door as fugitives. It left them there as a family.